This is my self-directed project sketchbook. Week 1 began with our 2 primer weeks. I started by exploring broad design examples and mapping out what kinds of design practices actually exist. As a group, we explored various design practice cards and sorted them into categories: social, commercial, ecological and discursive. We also had several guest lectures, one from someone working in service design at the New York Times, another from Andrew, an industrial designer with a background in manufacturing, and one from Victoria, a human-centred practitioner working in inclusion and disability services. These really helped broaden my perspective on possible design lenses. At this point, I began using case study thinking as a way to reflect on what kinds of projects actually matter to me. I created cards based on inspirational case studies, like Pieces of the Puzzle by Rory McLachlan, Backpack by Louise Mather, and Scoby by Make Roll Up. From this, I started forming my project lens. I wanted something user-centred, ideally in a healthcare context, exploring service design, speculative design, or user experience, with a focus on underrepresented voices. Week 2, I started to define the brief. This week was all about reflection and scoping. I looked back on my education at GSA by mapping out methodologies I'd used over the years to better understand what methods I actually enjoy and want to apply in this project. I made a set of my own methodology cards to visualise and explore these approaches further. With that foundation, I wrote my proposed brief. My lens was healthcare, my user group was families, especially those navigating growth, education and emotional challenges. I wanted my outcome to support empathy, understanding and emotional development. Methodologically, I leaned into co-design, ethnography and systems thinking. My design ambition was simple, but powerful. I wanted to create tools for deeper understanding and support in relationships shaped by chronic illness. By week 3, I started my research. I refined my research question to: how can mutual understanding and open communication between those with chronic illness and their partners strengthen their relationship and improve emotional and physical well-being? I started by investigating how chronic illness feels, mentally, physically and emotionally. A common thread was the feeling of being invisible, of being split between two bodies. When looking specifically at marriages, I found 5 consistent ways illness impacts daily life. I then gathered lived experiences from both chronically ill individuals and their partners. The stories were raw and deeply personal. Some described their relationships crumbling under pressure, others shared how emotionally exhausting the dynamic could be. I also looked at both book reports, one of which described how chronic pain affects both partners. Findings showed that not only does one partner's mood directly affect others, but sexual and emotional intimacy often decline, with no dedicated support outside of general therapy. There were loads of support services online, but most were prescriptive and lacked empathy. Often geared solely toward the person with the illness, there was nothing meaningful for the couple. I shifted focus from general services and online advice to identifying deeper relational patterns. I defined 4 key insights. First, emotional and relational support is often overlooked. Second, relational frequently shift into caregiving dynamic. Third, collaboration is valuable but hard to sustain when both partners are emotionally and physically drained. And finally, while communication is essential, it often creates emotional tension, especially when partners are trying not to hurt each other. These insights led me to the core question that shaped my design direction. How can these relationships communicate effectively without hurting each other? One of the main reasons I chose to explore marriages and chronic illness was because I felt it was an area that's largely untouched and underrepresented. So much of existing support around chronic illness focuses on individuals' physical health, but very little looks at how it affects the emotional and relational dynamics between partners. I came across a statistic that really stuck with me. 75% of marriages impacted by chronic illness end in divorce. That figure alone made me realise just how little support exists for couples trying to stay connected while navigating something so unpredictable and emotionally complex. By now, I started to look at doing interviews. So I created separate interview questions for each partner, as well as some joint questions. I then chose to interview them separately, just to allow for more privacy and reduce influence in their answers. After the interviews, I carried out a thematic analysis of the interviews, which revealed deep emotional insights. Partners often mask their emotions to protect each other, and communication was filled with unspoken needs. I began seeing this emotional weight as something that needed to be shared more gently. I also created a couple's journey map, imagining a typical day and mapping emotional highs and lows. This helped me identify key moments where design intervention could support communication, connection, and reflection. To deepen my understanding of my user group further, I created persona cards based on the two couples I interviewed. I also explored how might be statements. The two major needs emerged: 1, a way to maintain romance and intimacy while learning about each other, and 2, a way to communicate without emotional burden and burnout. I reanalysed existing tools and products, most focused on love and intimacy rather than illness, which actually helped me. I was drawn to the ones that use visual, semi-structured and sensory-based experiences. I wanted to integrate this thinking into my own co-design session. Since my focus was on love and intimacy in the context of illness, I themed the session around Valentine's Day to keep it warm, playful and reflective. I developed 4 activities. 1 was love and care mapping, which was to show how couples express and receive love and how illness might affect their love languages. 2 was a chocolate box reflection, which was a playful prompt to open difficult conversations and share appreciation. 3 was date night collaging, which was a way to explore what intimacy means now versus before the illness and how it's been adapted. 4 was emotional and symptom sketching, using tactile mark making to express unspoken emotions and frustrations. I then conducted the co-design session, which was extremely successful and rich and valuable in answers. The session confirmed the need for a toolkit that supports emotional expression and connection. It became clear how hard it was for partners to articulate their needs, even though they thought they communicated well. One collage done by a non-ill partner felt too structured, almost instructional, and like a checklist. The chronically ill partner's collage felt aspirational and dreamy, a vision of what a date night could be. Emotion sketching proved especially difficult, highlighting a lack of emotional reflection in their relationship. From this, I formed a key insight. Couples want to learn about each other, but don't want that learning to feel like work. My design challenge became: how might we integrate emotional learning and communication into a date night without making it feel clinical or forced? The needs I identified were to make it playful and not heavy, to not interrupt the date night and to blend naturally, and to promote connection and not confrontation. This quote from my mum really shaped the direction of the project. It came up during a conversation about date nights and storytelling through the collage session. She said, "I want to feel normal. I don't always want to talk about my illness. What I do want is to feel acknowledged, loved, and enjoy the moment like every other couple," which made me realise you don't always need words to feel seen. She still wants to be understood just in a way that feels natural and like any other couple. That's what led me to focus on playful, emotional tools that create connection without needing constant conversation. From concept development, I brainstormed several early ideas. I came up with the idea of emotions as objects, a sensory tasting kit, and unfolding a conversations toolkit. I mapped out emotional moments of need like a cancelled rare date night, a burnout from emotional labour, and feeling helpless when the other is unwell. I broke these down into shared and individual emotional responses such as guilt, fear, grief, frustration, and loneliness. Then I ran a low fidelity test. I asked couples to create tactile representations of their emotions. I placed these in a date night setting. They only chose a few each, which taught me that I don't need every emotion visualised. 5 key emotional artefacts might be enough to prompt meaningful conversation without overwhelm. Interestingly, participants were often surprised by what each other picked. Some opened up and others simply just acknowledged, but even that small gesture felt meaningful. Going forward, I started to begin toolkit planning. I began exploring the idea of including a zine, not as a brand or a product, but a soft and illustrative guide to why the toolkit matters and how it can be used. Something simple, accessible and informative, just enough to judge people into using it with care. To refine the experience, I looked at the different types of date nights couples might have. Eating a meal together, ordering takeaway, watching a movie, or even eating separately. This showed that the toolkit needs to be flexible, responsive, and integrated into whatever type of evening they were having. I began my initial prototyping by translating the emotional language I'd previously gathered into visual and tangible forms, creating emotional artifacts as tools. I blended this with the idea of cutlery, not to be used functionally or for eating, but to seamlessly integrate into a date night setting as objects of interaction, playfulness, and emotional exploration. I use found objects and materials to quickly prototype these concepts and test how they might feel in someone's hands, how they can invite touch, conversation, and curiosity. When testing the tools, I noticed that the participants naturally centred their conversations around interpretation. What the objects meant, how they connected to personal emotions, and what insights they offered about each other. There was a clear presence of togetherness, playfulness, and joy. The tools opened space for discussion, sharing, and acting without forcing the interaction. The feedback confirmed the emotions had been captured well, offering a meaningful yet light way to connect. When testing again, I noticed something beautiful. The toolkit prompted laughter, imagination, and playful interaction, pretending forks were swords, passing food, feeding one another, and swapping plates. It wasn't just about talking, it was about doing something together. Participants emphasised that there was no right way to use it. They simply followed what felt natural. I reframed the project as an interactive dining experience that fosters connection through play. My branding naturally developed through the process. Although I didn't want the brand to become a massive part of the project, it became apparent that I had to give the project a name and a logo just to separate it from regular cutlery. I also wanted to think about where it's going to live. I personally wanted it to live in a box, just to create it apart from living with other cutlery. My branding developed naturally through the process. It needed to feel tactile, imperfect, and human, steering away from anything sterile or overly corporate. I experimented with warm, aura-like colours inspired by emotional energy and touch. Using mark-making movements captured during testing, I visualised these gestures on paper and cut them out. When layered together, they began to resemble food on a plate, a visual nod to the toolkit's setting and purpose. This became the foundation for the final logo, which I paired with a felt-tip style font to evoke something handmade and personal, like a note scribbled on a shoebox lid. I wanted the branding to feel like something co-created, something with memory and warmth, rather than a polished impersonal product. The name Within came from a simple but powerful idea, that emotions live within us, and it's healthier to let them out. It's also a reminder that you are more than your illness, you're a whole person. The logo design layers this name gently into the mark making, with Within sometimes appearing tucked out, just under or peeking through, reflecting introspection and process and care. Just a quick reflection, overall I felt the final presentation went really well. I was confident in how I presented the project and the feedback I received reflected that the concept resonated with people. My peers were really engaged and responded positively to the emotional depth and playfulness of the toolkit, and it was encouraging to see how many people appreciate the tone, aesthetics and intent behind it. However, some key constructive feedback came through which I found really helpful. A few people suggested that the tools themselves could be refined and slightly more polished, not in a way that compromises their handmade quality, but in terms of their material choices and finish, particularly to ensure that they are food safe and feel more resolved as final products. This is something I agree with and plan to address in my final iteration. Another important point raised was the accessibility and the delivery of the toolkit. While the idea and physical components were strong, I realised I hadn't fully communicated the system behind it. How couples would actually come across the toolkit, who provides it, and in what context. This feedback pushed me to think more deeply about its distribution and integration, and I've since been considering models such as the NHS supported wellbeing packs, or partnerships with the chronic illness charities, or even third parties such as Etsy. This reflection has helped me to see that the emotional impact of the toolkit could be even more powerful if it's embedded within a system of care and support. During the final round of feedback, I was asked to clarify how the toolkit would be accessed. I explored 3 different routes. A. The NHS supported as a part of a self-management pack for chronic illness. B. A charity-supported tool through Lupus UK or Versus Arthritis. Or C. A social enterprise sold online, such as Etsy. I chose option A. Distributing through the NHS allows GPs or specialists to offer it during appointments. This route connects it to a broader support pathways while retaining the toolkit's warmth and creativity. So now the toolkit is finally finished and quite a bit has changed since the initial prototypes are presented earlier in the project. After the interim presentation, one of the key pieces of feedback I received was that the toolkit didn't feel fully materialised yet. While the concept was strong, the actual tools needed to better reflect open-ended emotional qualities I was aiming for, and I also needed to reconsider my material choices. A big concern was around food safety and material durability. Some of the initial pieces weren't finished to a standard I was happy with, and they didn't feel robust or functional. Even as abstract tools, so I went back and remade the toolkit, this time with a stronger focus on using found materials, particularly around actual cutlery. I edited and altered these forms into something more expressive, intuitive and tactile, which brings in small enhancements that made a big difference to both the look and the interaction. The remaking process really changed how the toolkit comes across. It no longer feels like a set of symbolic emotional objects or something that you can't use. It's now a balanced blend of play, function and emotion. The new versions allow for more interaction, more spontaneity, and much more finished feel overall. You'll see in the final photos that some tools have stayed quite close to the originals, while others have evolved significantly. In some cases it was just about slight refinements, cleaning up forms, adjusting textures, or rethinking the finishes. In the others, the tools were completely reimagined to feel more open-ended and playful, while still grounded in their emotional intent. The toolkit is designed for a date night setting because that's often the one time couples intentionally carve out space for each other. But when chronic illness gets in the way, plans get cancelled, energy is low, symptoms flare. It can start to feel like even those moments aren't safe. This toolkit acts as a gentle backup, something that still allows for closeness, reflection, and connection, even when the original plan can't happen. Its value lies in offering a playful, intuitive, and emotionally sensitive way for couples to express, connect, and feel supported, of course without forcing heavy conversations. It helps couples feel seen and normal, reminding them that their relationship is still theirs, even in the face of illness.